Okay, 101 electricity. It's counterintuitive. The small one is the hot one. That's where all the power comes from. The larger one is the neutral. Hot wants to go to neutral. Hot wants to go to ground. These two are actually the same. Back in the breaker box, these are separate wires. This one is a bare wire. This is a white wire, and they hook to the exact same position. You'd say, why do they even have it? Because the circuit is actually from hot to neutral. The ground is along to save you, to keep you safe, to have the electricity end up in the ground. But that is also the circuit. Anyway, long story short. Okay, so to prove that, we have a little meter here, and we know that hot wants to go to ground, hot to ground, and it says 110. We're good. If we tried to go neutral to ground, they're really the same wire. Proven right here, there's just no circuit, there's no juice. We can go hot to ground, and that makes a circuit because hot wants to find ground. So that's the main thing I want you to know. The small one is where the hot is, that's where the juice comes from. It's trying to travel to either one of those. And then we're going to transfer that on. This is a standard outlet, as you know. It is 15 amp. And then we're going to go to your 20 amp circuit next on your receptacle. Okay, now I'm going to explain how we did this. And I'm going to have a still image that I just got offline showing the different poles of a 4-prong dryer. Okay, now we have a diagram of what the 220 dryer plug looks like, the 4-prong. And if you look at the bottom where you see the color code, the first top one is black, 120 volt A phase. That just means it's a particular 120 as opposed to the other one. The next one, red, 120 volt B phase. So for simplicity, they're both hots. One is A and one is B. They're different hots, but they're both hots. 120 and 120 at 240. A lot of people call this 110 and 110. Same thing, it takes you to 220. And again, we've already talked about that. 110, 120, it's all the same. 220, 240, it's all the same. It's just doubled it up. Okay, next one down is neutral. That is white. And then the bottom one is ground. So you see where these perspective wires are. The two flat ones that look exactly the same, those are both hots. They're just two different 110 hots added together make your 120 or 220. Then the odd L-shaped one is the neutral. That's where the hots want to go to. And then the last one is the ground. The ground is for your protection. And so I just want you to understand that, and then we're going to move on to how I wired this. And it's very simple. The two blades that look the same, here and here, are both hots. You could say 120 volt AC, A phase, B phase, however you want to say it. This is a hot and this is a separate or different hot. Then you have the neutral, that's this L-shaped one. And then the familiar larger version of a household one is the round one, which is the ground. So those are all labeled HH and G. So then we come over to here, and this is what we have wired up. And it's very similar. Here's a regular, this is very close to a regular outlet. The small one is the hot. The larger one is the neutral, and then the ground. This has this caveat here that will allow a regular outlet, as you can see, just by these two blades, because this is 20 amp, and you see that right there up in the corner. It'll also, it'll let like a low thing like a lamp or anything plug into it. And then when you have a higher one that has this special prong going sideways, it'll allow that to plug in also, because this was only wired if the circuit behind it can allow 20 amps. Okay, so what we want here is we want this to be hot, we want this to be neutral, we want this to be ground. We're going to check that right now, one at a time. So go back here, and I clip this tester on the hot. I'm using a device that puts off a sound when the same thing is touched. So when I go here, Okay, all that does is check the circuit, that this circuit from this thing to this thing, when I touch it, it'll make a sound. So that tells us is if this part here, which part here is it hooked up to? These are tamper resistant, so I can't just shove in there. So I'll just go to what it's wired to. This wires to this. Okay, so this proves that this hot is on this hot leg right here. It's not on this one. It's silent. It's not on the ground. It's not on the neutral. Okay, so we're good there. Now we go over to this one. This needs 2 hots because it's 220. So 1 hot comes from this side, 1 from this side. We'll check this one, nothing. We check this one, there it is. So it's the same hot here and here. And that's exemplified by a wire just connecting those two. And then this black wire here is a hot that goes back to that one. Okay, moving on, we go to the next hot. Now we take this off of this hot, put it on the other hot. And we come back here to our 110 circuit. This should show nothing, and it does. This should show nothing, and it does, because those two are the other hot. Now we come to this one, and there we go. In a 220 circuit, black is always hot. We see that coming out of the dryer cord here. When there's 2 hots, the second one, if I can turn this around, is red, and it's labeled hot, and then the black one is labeled hot. Green is always ground. This N right here, that's always neutral. White is neutral. Okay, so we've got, now we'll go on to the next one. We'll go back to this cable, and we'll go on to the neutral. There. Okay, making sure we're still working. Yep. Then over here, we know that this guy, the big one, is supposed to be neutral. So we go to its screw, which is here. Okay, so we know this is neutral. And on this one, there isn't a neutral. It's 3-wire, 220 volt. You're gonna have hot, hot, and ground. Okay, so that's the next one, the last one we'll go to. We hook this one to ground, if it can go that fat. There, good, okay. We're still hooked up, yes. We come back here to our outlets, and this should make a noise. And it does, good. And then we're gonna check these, as I can reach in there, and this one. Let me come to the outside first. There, okay. The green screw on any receptacle is the ground. And I see that I've got my green wire. Let me turn this around this way. There we go. Right out of the dryer cord comes the green, which is always ground. And that goes up to the green screw on the receptacle. So my lead came off over here, but let me put that back on. I know I'm nerding out and boring you to death, but I just have to cover my butt and show you that all this is wired the way it ought to. I guess I may have to hold that on there. Okay, so coming back here, I'm going to touch that on there, ground, okay? And which one is that in here? It's this one. It's the one that's unique, the one that has the L shape. That's your ground. So these two are hot. Again, we're going to prove that by hooking this one on a hot. It's this one. Is it any of these? No. And then we do the other hot. Should be this top one. Yep. It's not this one. That's the other hot, and that's the ground. So now we've just proven that these two hots go to this one and this one. And this one is ground. We've proven that it goes to the ground wire over here. Then over here in your 110 circuit, we only have one hot. It happens to go straight across to this one. And that would be this one here. We've got a hot, we have a neutral, that goes back to this neutral, and then we have a ground right here. The ground goes to the ground. So your equipment should work well. I have never ran something where you're taking something off of the leg of the 220 to give you 110, and that's a pretty high load at 20 amps. But we'll give it a try. I say put your machine in here first, run it a while, get to know its speed and sound, and then turn this one on. And if it pulls it down a little bit, that would be fairly normal. But if it pulls it down substantially, then we may have to figure out a different way to wire this thing. Okay, Chase, here's the final product. So it's simply plug that into the dryer. You've got your two outlets here. Just know that this one, for whatever reason, didn't come with the anchoring screws like this did. But I've got a lot of stuff for you to take back. All those plugs, we didn't end up going that way. And so that made it a lot simpler, but those things aren't cheap, and so you'll take all this stuff back. You might keep the 3-prong, or find an adapter. Go online and see if there's an adapter from this that you plug right into this, and then it goes to 3-prong. But at any rate, when you take this stuff back for return, just walk in with this thing and ask them where the screws are, these electrical box screws right there, and then anchor that down. You can always ask him if there's a plate. They will sell you a blank plate, and then you could bore out these holes. Just a thought.